I think about 87% of our fee earners globally are using Percy, and we're seeing, I think, about 120,000 prompts per month.
The biggest strength of a large language model is the ability to consume and process text. And if there's one profession in the financial services market that reads documents and text more than any other, that would be lawyers. In today's episode, I'm excited to have renowned international law firm Simmons Simmons on the podcast to talk about their own proprietary AI tool, Percy. With me today is Izzy Tennyson. Welcome to the pod.
Thank you for having me, and happy to be here.
Excellent. Izzy, why don't we start off with telling everyone a little bit about yourself and where you've come from?
Sure. Well, yeah, again, thanks for having me. My name's Izzy Tennyson. So I'm a supervising associate in our digital business group at Simmons Simmons. I practice across our UK and Irish offices. And my practice focuses really on technology and data privacy with, I suppose, a particular emphasis on AI, both the kind of regulatory side and also the practical and contracting side. So the kind of procurement and supply of AI as well. But I also wear a second hat at Simmons Simmons. So I'm an AI champion for our UK digital business team, which means that I spend quite a lot of time, I suppose, encouraging and promoting the use of our own AI power tool, Percy, as you mentioned, safely and effectively as well in our day-to-day work.
I'm very excited to get into Percy, but before we do, I mentioned obviously Simmons Simmons as an international law firm. Can you tell us more about who Simmons Simmons are, a bit about their footprint globally, who their clients are, and what services they provide?
Sure. So we're an international law firm, as you mentioned, with, I suppose, a true focus on 5 key sectors. So that's TMT, financial services, NRIC, healthcare and life sciences, and of course, asset management and funds. So we've got 23 offices globally. So we're across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. And we also have a representative office in San Francisco. And I suppose in the kind of fund space specifically, we act for, managers, sponsors, service providers, really across the kind of whole life cycle. So fund formation, regulation, distribution, outsourcing, and now, really increasingly that digital transformation piece. So I suppose that's where I come in, and a lot of my kind of AI and technology work ends up intersecting with how those funds are operating in practice.
So Percy is Simmons Simmons' own AI tool. Can you tell us a bit about its history and what it actually is?
Yeah, so I suppose before we get into the detail of kind of Percy itself, it's worth probably taking a bit of a step back. So around, I think 7 or 8 years ago, the firm acquired a legal engineering business called 𝐒𝐻𝐿𝐦𝐻𝐿. So kind of before the kind of 2022 GenAI boom happened, we were already working with clients building, legal solutions for them and for ourselves as well. So things like workflow tools and, data-driven insights and things like that. So we were quite well set up when 2022 did come along and that boom happened. So we were quite well placed there. And I suppose we recognized quite quickly that the Gen AI thing wasn't going to be, a passing trend. It was really going to and has become kind of critical to the way that legal services are being delivered. And we made, a very conscious decision at that time to be masters of our own destiny there rather than, tied to a single supplier with a fixed offering. So we built our own Gen AI tool called Percy. Percy is named after one of the firm's founders. So there was 21-year-old twin brothers, Percy and Edward Simmons, who set the firm up. So there's a little bit of heritage kind of linkage there. But I suppose Percy it's a custom-built Gen AI platform. It is hosted securely on our own infrastructure, and it's designed specifically for legal work. So our work often involves, long and complex documents, and Percy's engineered to handle those with much better precision than a kind of a generic chatbot. But actually, it began its life at Simmons and Simmons as much more of an educational kind of sandbox tool. It was built as a way for like a safe space for lawyers and technologists to explore how these kind of tools work in a really hands-on way, and understand how, where the power was in the tools, and also where the kind of limitations were. But it really progressed very quickly to, prove its value in real matters, and it's now used by kind of the vast majority of the firm as their kind of primary GenAI tool for things like document review and drafting support and knowledge retrieval. So by building Percy, we gained kind of that full control over how it works, how our data is handled, and the kind of tools that we want to integrate, the LLMs and the models that we plug into Percy. We have full control over that. And that really means then that we can evolve with the legal needs, our lawyers' needs, but also kind of stay aligned to our business priorities and remain relevant as well as the kind of technology continues to advance at pace.
Let's dive into that history a little bit more. Couple of questions. One, when did Percy roll out? And then two, you mentioned testing it internally with getting used to it, etc. What were some of the original capabilities that you had? Was it knowledge management trained on procedures, just kind of like a chatbot, but ring-fenced within your own documents? And then I guess the third and final question is, was it a firm-wide rollout, or did you start with a small group of champions and then roll it out in phases?
Yeah, so I think it rolled out probably in either late 2022 or early 2023. It was very much a kind of a basic tool. I think it was trained on our internal policy documents, so like HR policy documents and things like that. And it was really just so that you could ask it questions and see what kind of came out of it. And then they kind of quite quickly started building on that, and it was rolled out firm wide at this point, and continued to be rolled out. Then the AI champions kind of came along. So there's 73 AI champions globally. So I'm the UK digital business champion, but we've got, champions in all offices, and particularly in the UK in all kind of teams. And there was a lot of training rolled out to everybody. So, and actually, sorry, to take a step back, before you could access Percy in the first place, you would need to complete some mandatory training on how the kind of tools work. I suppose today, if we're looking under the bonnet of Percy, it's really powered by the same class of LLMs or large language models that you and your listeners will have heard of, like OpenAI's GPT model family. But the important bit is, as I mentioned, is that we've built our own application and an infrastructure around those models. So Percy runs in our own private Azure environment. So we control the kind of full stack, starting with the kind of the application layer, how the tool behaves, the user experience, what features are switched on and when, the supporting tools. So like, an OCR for scanned documents, or, odd type of files like PDFs, things like that. The data, so where that's stored, how long it's stored for, who can access it, and then, as I mentioned, the models. So when we adopt new models, we can test those before it ever touches any client work. But because legal documents are so diverse, and complex and long, we've built a kind of a custom inference engine. So sometimes you'll want to feed, an entire document into the model to preserve context, and other times you want to search intelligently across a kind of a whole corpus of contracts. And Percy has two modes for that. So plus an intelligent router, which helps then pick the right approach based on the user's questions, the file size. So then to make sure that that works in practice, we've created our own kind of like benchmarking and evaluation pipeline using real legal use cases, real user behavior. And that lets us then compare different approaches on things that really matter to us, like accuracy, on long fun documents or consistency in clause extraction. So a benefit then, as the models improve over time, Percy then benefits from that, once we've done our own kind of validation. So we don't just flip a switch and hope it works. We test it against those benchmarks first. So hopefully that's answered your question, but if not, let me know.
No, very good. And it sounds as if you've got effectively your own model selection there, whereas some of the public chatbots, for example, they can either have think or reasoning depending on what your query is. What you described there sounds like you've created your own equivalent there as well.
Exactly right. Yes. So we've just rolled out 5.1 with the kind of enhanced reasoning, and you have different optionality in terms of the level of reasoning. We've got quick reasoning, balanced reasoning, and then like that really detailed enhanced reasoning, as well as still accessing the 4.1s as well. So we've got a lot of optionality.
Why don't we now jump into some real life use cases? What would be some of the top uses within the firm of Percy? And what benefits is it giving the lawyers as well?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think from where we started with the kind of, certainly in my own experience when I started using that, the initial tool, which was trained on HR data, moving from that to where we are today is kind of a significant leap, actually. It was looking at my own practice, things like data impact assessments, data processing impact assessments, things that are quite like process driven but quite manual and like long tasks. It's made a real impact there. So as I mentioned, data impact assessments, DPIAs, this is something that we've been working on in our team specifically because we deal with a lot of data processing, and we've built these kind of mega prompts now which will look at a template DPIA. It will look at examples of similar assessments that have been done previously for a client or other clients. It will take all of that information and prepare a really kind of fantastic starting point for lawyers to then take forward with clients. But other examples which are hugely beneficial, particularly for our junior lawyers, is kind of the contract review and drafting use cases. So we've got prompts that will compare redlined documents, so looking at markups that other side has sent across, understanding the changes that have been made, what the impact of that change is on our client, what we might want to push back on, what possible compromises we've got. And you get some really, really great output in terms of commercial understanding and things like that.
Sorry, can we just dive into that a little bit there? So you get a contract back from the other side's law firm, you run it through. What is the output that the lawyer is receiving? Is it a report? Is it a chat interface? What does that actually look like?
It's really a chat interface. I suppose with these kinds of models, the more you put in, if you expect it to give everything all at once, the output is generally not that good. So what you really want to be thinking about is looking at small sections one at a time. So for that kind of review, there's very specific prompts which have like start conditions in, and we'll look at, okay, clause 1A, what is the change here? La da da da. Then moving on to 1B, is there any change there? What's the impact on the client? And it will give a kind of an assessment one clause at a time. So there is still a little bit of time spent in terms of extracting the data and the output, but the quality of what you're getting is great. And it's a really great starting point, as I said, particularly for juniors who maybe don't have the kind of commercial or the commercial experience. They may not have seen that type of scenario before, and Percy's able to give them some really great insights into what the actual impact is. Now, more often than not, you'll get maybe a list of these are the 5 impacts, and actually only maybe 2 or 3 are things that we really care about. But the 2 that you pull out are really great, and it's a really great starting point then. So I suppose the kind of key benefits are speed and certainty, but also then consistency as well. it's a really great starting point, as I mentioned. But obviously needs a little bit of engagement. So a couple of other kind of great use cases that we're seeing is, article writing. There's so much legislation coming out of particularly the EU and other jurisdictions at the moment. And being able to work through all of that information quite quickly to pull out, the kind of key points for our clients has been really invaluable. Also, things like due diligence. I think any lawyer who's supported on a corporate matter knows the pain of working through, data rooms to pull out kind of specific pieces of information. So having tools like Percy to help with that, it's great. I mean, it's really, really, really helpful.
And the one question I have on this is there's obviously a few famous cases of lawyers going into court referencing case law that doesn't exist. So how do you, especially in the law world, account for potential hallucinations?
Yeah, there's been quite a few, I suppose, unfortunate cases that we've seen recently. And actually, there was one over the weekend coming out of Australia. They're all really good examples, I think, of how not to use this technology. I think the way that we kind of think about it at Simmons and how we manage that risk is through policy and training and I suppose importantly mindset as well. So policy wise, Percy, and we're very clear, it's not a legal research tool. So as I kind of mentioned earlier, lawyers have to complete some mandatory training before they get access. So it's quite like the kind of AML training that we're required to do every year, those types of sessions. And that training makes clear, you don't ask Percy to find case law or quote regulation from memory. You need to be working from trusted source documents. So we encourage everybody to upload the data that they're looking to rely on. So let's say, for example, I'm looking at the EU GDPR or UK GDPR. I will upload the relevant legislation. I will upload the relevant guidance from the regulator. I won't ask Percy to just come up with things like that. It will be summarizing from what I've given it. And then we also, as kind of the AI champions, we provide support through kind of ongoing training and education. So we run, regular sessions on good use cases and, effective prompting. And we're generally on hand to help people who are not really sure what they're doing. And actually one of the things that I am kind of seeing the benefits of all of that now, which is great, is people are starting to build their own prompts now rather than coming to you directly to say, can you draft me a prompt? They're building it, sending it to me, and it's always really good. And it's great to see that progress. But I think the real key is the critical thinking, right? We can't really get away from that. And I suppose the way we look at Percy ourselves is, and probably like most firms, it's a very bright junior colleague. The output itself that you're getting from it is not the deliverable that you're sharing with the client. It's really a starting point, and it's a great starting point. But you still have to review it. You have to challenge it, and you have to make it your own before it goes anywhere near a client. Talking to other AI champions, they see it as a great challenging tool, and they will like almost have discussions with it about specific topics and say, well, if it's this, then why not that? And so it's great for that kind of thing. The way that we explain that these models, and you'll know as well, like they're designed to give you an answer. If they don't have that information, they will make something up. So they're quite sycophantic in that way. So we really encourage lawyers to upload and anchor everything in our own documents and our own data, and then use Percy to analyze that rather than relying on whatever the model has been trained on, because we don't know what the models have been trained on, and we might never know. So I think if you combine that mindset with the kind of effective prompting and proper review, the starting point that you get from Percy is usually, great, but it's always got to be subject to that human judgment, which is, exactly then where our value as lawyers comes in.
If you're enjoying the Fund AI pod, the best way to support the show is simple. Hit subscribe. It really helps a new channel like this grow. and it allows us to attract even more interesting guests from across the funds industry. Head to www.thefundaipod.com to catch past episodes, nominate future guests, or explore ways that we can work together, whether that's consulting, sponsorship, speaking, or collaboration. Now back to the episode. Talking on adoption, how does that look at Simmons and Simmons? And maybe starting with the taking it up. So you mentioned obviously there's training, you've got AI champions, but what else is the firm doing to increase and promote the adoption of it? And what does the ongoing training look like?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think adoption probably slow to start with, but I think it's seen a lot of improvement and it's been really encouraging, and particularly in the last, I would say, 12 months. But it's really a change management exercise, and rather than just, like flicking on a new tool. So some of our junior and kind of mid-level lawyers were, really quick to embrace Percy because they immediately could see that relief, from those time-consuming tasks, especially those like really forensic manual tasks, like clause extraction and things like that. Probably on the kind of more senior side, they, from my perspective and my own experience, understandably a little bit more cautious. They're quite protective of quality and reputation, and, rightly so. And I think the way that we've tried to address it is by involving them in the kind of design and testing rather than just asking them to, straight up trust a black box. So the training sessions that we run use really real life examples from their own practice areas so they can really see where Percy is performing well and where human oversight is critical. So tying it back to that kind of really bright junior colleague, we're very explicit that they remain in control. And I think actually from running these sessions, the more that they see, the more I think it becomes quite real. So the message is really not like you must use this tool, but it's here's how you can make your work a lot easier while keeping you firmly in charge. And even from my own experience, actually, when we first started kind of playing around with the kind of sandbox tool, it was a bit of an unknown as to what it could do, what the kind of the art of the possible is. And it was only through kind of playing with it and testing it a little bit to understand. So the AI champions have been really important in terms of that adoption and sharing their use cases. So we have a prompt library now where all of our really great prompts are shared and they're accessible to all teams across the firm. And you can go quite quickly and find them, and it's been really helpful. But seeing the real life examples has, I think, I don't want to say inspired because that feels a bit corny, but inspired people to use it a little bit more. And then I suppose in terms of pure data, we've seen quite a significant increase over the past kind of 12 months, as I mentioned. So I think about 87% of our fee earners globally are using Percy, and we're seeing, I think, about 120,000 prompts per month. Then we saw, I think, their daily prompt jumped from 500, jumped by 583% in the last, I think, 12 months, from like 800 prompts a day to I think over 5,500 or something like that. So certainly see that trajectory continuing. And actually now that, people are getting a little bit more confident in using the tools and building the prompts and using it well, we're actually taking a bit of a step forward into the next phase of the journey, which is looking at what other tools we might build on top and exploring things like agents and much more specialized workflows, which is really exciting.
That was going to be my next question is, do you envision moving into agentic workflow within your firm, and would you look to build it yourself or would you potentially go external?
So we have already partnered with a company called 𝐒𝐞𝐞𝐭 to help us build agents. So we've already rolled one agent out, which is like an NDA agent, which is really amazing, particularly for, corporate lawyers where they're dealing with big transactions that require, a lot of NDAs to be put in place. this agent will essentially draft the NDAs. It will engage with any markups, and it's really quite amazing. We are also working on a couple of other agents at the moment, and hoping to roll those out. But we are certainly engaging with the teams to start thinking about, okay, well, where are those really kind of process driven heavy tasks that we could use and build our own tools here to make life for ourselves easier, but also potentially for our clients as well, make their lives a lot easier. Certainly things like DPA, so data processing agreements, are fairly standardized documents now. So those are the kind of things that we're exploring, but I certainly see that becoming much more of a trend and a focus in the next kind of probably 5 years.
And as you look at partners, was Percy built solely internally, or did you partner with a Microsoft or someone else externally to build
So
it?
we built Percy entirely internally, but we have been as far as I'm aware, we've been in very close contact with Microsoft and actually had some really fantastic feedback from the Microsoft UK CEO, who publicly commended kind of the edge that Percy was giving us, which was amazing, amongst kind of the flurry of awards that we got last year as well. So yeah, it's entirely internally built, but we work very closely with Microsoft.
And looking under the hood, it sounds as if from what you're saying is you take the model, you have your own instance of it, and it's hosted and sandboxed internally at Simmons and Simmons. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes.
And does that mean that none of the information that goes into the queries and therefore the models is going out to the external public model training?
Exactly right. And actually, I mean, that's kind of one of the key or the first questions that we really get asked when we're talking to clients about our use of AI, is how we are protecting their data. So it was like once we kind of walk them through those safeguards, so operating in a secure environment, it's not a public chatbot, we remain fully in control. Clients are much more open to the conversation, and actually we've demonstrated Percy to a couple of our clients, or quite a few of our clients now, and they're all pretty blown away. And I think they're probably all on similar journeys in terms of like that art of the possible. They're all exploring what tools are available to them, or maybe have some tools already, but aren't quite sure necessarily the best way to get the most out of them. So it's also, as an AI champion and a kind of a tech lawyer, it's been quite satisfying to be able to help clients in their own journey as well, which has been great.
So, in the law world, there's a famous AI tool called Harvey that's used by quite a few of the international law firms. How does Percy compare to Harvey, and what are the pros and cons of it?
Yeah, so I've not personally seen Harvey, I've not used it, but I think at a kind of a really high level, both Percy and Harvey sit on top of similar underlying technology. So they both use the kind of general purpose LLMs like that GPT family from OpenAI. And neither is magically powered by a kind of a secret legal brain. The differentiation is really in how that technology is implemented and governed and integrated in firms. So I suppose picking up on Percy, and what I said earlier, Percy's, it's our own in-house application. It's built on Azure's, on Simmons and Simmons private Azure cloud, and that means we control the entire environment. And we've built that retrieval and routing layer as well. So we can choose the best way to answer queries and handle those kind of long, complex documents, as I mentioned. But then Harvey, kind of by contrast, it's a third-party SaaS platform. So from public information, firms will upload their data into Harvey's environment, and they benefit from Harvey's feature set and its roadmap. So you can configure it, of course, but you don't necessarily, or you don't control the platform in the same way. And those kind of new capabilities that are rolled out by Harvey, they're rolled out generally rather than kind of being custom built around one firm's specific needs. So I guess the real difference is not so much a Percy versus Harvey as whose approach you prefer. So whether it's a vendor solution or in our case, it's a firm specific platform that we can adapt, govern, and evolve exactly in line with our risk profile. And that might all come down to costs, to be fair. I mean, we have our own legal team set up to build. We were very quick to make that move, but that is not an option for a lot of firms. And in those cases, the Harveys and the 𝐒𝐤𝐽s, that's where they come in.
And I think that customization is quite a big strength of yours in that you can drive the product development where you want, when you want, and you know where the needs is across your firm.
100%. Yeah, exactly.
Now, tapping into your role as an AI champion, if a firm was looking to roll out AI and they were just at the start of the journey, using your lessons learned from the rollout within Simmons and Simmons, what would be some advice you would say in ensuring that the adoption is as broad and fast as possible?
Yeah, that is a really good question. I suppose a sensible first step would be to treat AI as a governance topic rather than a technology purchase. So start by identifying a small number of kind of concrete problems that you need to solve for or you want to solve for. So the speeding up NDAs, extracting key terms from legal agreements or legacy agreements even, or summarizing regulatory updates. Then you can put in place some basic guardrails. So your internal AI policies, clarity on which tools are approved, and guidance on what type of data can and can't be used. And then I would recommend piloting with a kind of a limited group of users on kind of low risk documents to measure outcomes. But it's always important, I would say, to involve your legal team, your compliance team, your IT, and certainly your data protection teams early so that you don't end up with what's called shadow AI being used. And we see that quite a lot without any oversight.
And by shadow AI, you mean someone using ChatGPT on their phone, asking it a work question.
Yeah, exactly. We see a lot of cases of, you know, businesses not being comfortable or slightly cautious in terms of rolling out specific tools, but people obviously in the business being acutely aware of the tools that are available, freely or, on subscription and using those instead. And you might have cases of people in the business putting quite confidential information into those tools and not necessarily knowing what happens with it once it goes in. So it's really important.
And one topic you touched on was client feedback. What has the feedback been on your use of AI from clients when you tell them about how you're leveraging it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the feedback has been broadly very, very positive. I suppose with a kind of a healthy dose of curiosity. We mentioned that kind of confidentiality point earlier, but where they've experienced the output or seen it in action, the response has been really, really strong. I think, increasingly our clients are much more sophisticated. And so they see Percy as part of our shared journey rather than something kind of new and kind of exotic that only kind of law firms are doing. So, I mentioned that we've demoed to a few clients. Reactions have been great, some quite memorable. I saw some written down. One one client said, and I quote, "I'm salivating," which is not a phrase you hear often about legal tech. So yeah, so it's been really great. And I think a lot of our clients are quite keen to maybe get their hands on it, but I don't know what the plans are for that. So
So, on that, it is definitely internal only at this stage.
at this stage, it's an internal only tool. Yes.
So, Izzy, you're obviously a keen adopter of AI, especially as an AI champion. But if you were to reflect on AI in the funds industry, or sorry, in the lawyer space, what excites you most about the potential of AI?
I think what excites me the most is I suppose the potential for lawyers to move up the value chain. So if AI can kind of take on the heavy lifting of digesting document and extracting data, lawyers can spend more time on the kind of strategic conversations with clients. So in particularly in like the fund section, how to kind of structure products, how to manage investor expectations and things like that. But it also has the potential to democratize access to high quality legal insight. So those smaller, or emerging managers could benefit from tools and processes that historically were only kind of economical at large scale, because AI helps reduce some of that fixed cost. So that's probably what excites me. What excites me the most, and also probably the collaboration between all of the different teams within, the kind of legal compliance operation and the tech teams. I think that's really healthy for any industry where there's complex issues that rarely kind of sit neatly into one box.
And that's one of the broad appeals of AI is the mundane tasks can go away. You can focus on the value-added functions, relationship building, insights, creativity, etc. So I
Yeah,
100% agree with that.
yeah.
Well, Izzy, if people want to find out more about yourself and Simmons and Simmons, can you tell us about where we can contact you on LinkedIn, socials, and any websites that apply?
So I suppose the best place to find us is on our website, so simmonsandsimmons.com, but we've also got our Simmons and Simmons LinkedIn page. As a lot of our offices globally have their own LinkedIn pages as well. We regularly publish insights about, AI, funds, digital regulation on the website, including, updates on tools like Percy and how we're using that kind of technology. And, LinkedIn page is always a really good way to see new thought leadership and events as well that we're putting on. I'm also on LinkedIn as well. So if anybody wants to continue the conversation or has any questions, please do feel free to reach out.
Well, Izzy, I appreciate taking the time to share your story and Simmons stories on this pod. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.